Stop. Before you spend another $40 on a supplement your doctor can't explain and a label you can't pronounce, I need 2 minutes of your time. Because what I'm about to show you is not a wellness trend. It is not a detox protocol. It is not something a celebrity is selling. What I'm going to show you is a crime. Here is the crime scene. The global pharmaceutical industry is worth more than $500 billion a year. The supplement market alone, vitamins, herbal capsules, powdered extracts in shrink-wrapped tubs, crossed $40 billion in the United States last year. The lawn and garden chemical industry, the one that tells you your weeds are enemies and your yard must be sterile, $2 billion, just in the US, just last year. Now ask yourself one question. Where did all that money come from? It came from replacing things that grew in your grandmother's backyard, things your great-grandmother boiled in a pot and gave to a sick child before doctors made house calls, things that have been on this earth for thousands of years and that were never ever patented because no one owned them. You cannot patent a plant that God already put in the ground, and that is precisely the problem. That is the crime. You cannot build a $50 billion industry on something that grows wild in a field and costs nothing to produce. So the knowledge had to go. It had to be quietly moved from the kitchen and the garden and the apothecary cabinet and replaced with a bottle, a pill, a brand, and a prescription. The knowledge that truly sets you free is never hidden because it is secret. It is hidden because it is not profitable. Today, we bring it back. In the book of Numbers chapter 11 verse 5, the Israelites in the wilderness lamented the loss of Egyptian garlic, saying, "We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost, also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic." Garlic was so highly valued in ancient Egypt that workers building the pyramids were actually paid partly in garlic as wages. The Talmud mentions garlic for its strengthening properties, and Ayurvedic texts dating back to 300 BC describe it as a remedy for heart weakness. The Roman legions, well, they carried garlic to every corner of the known world. The key compound here is allicin. Technically, alliin, which is the precursor, gets converted to allicin by the enzyme alliinase when raw garlic is crushed or chopped. Allicin is honestly one of the most potent naturally occurring antimicrobial compounds ever identified in food. Here's how it works. Allicin inhibits the enzyme RNA polymerase in bacteria, even those drug-resistant strains. A study published in 1992 in Planta Medica found allicin effective against Staphylococcus aureus, including MRSA strains, and a meta-analysis in the Journal of Nutrition confirmed that garlic supplementation reduces systolic blood pressure by an average of 8.4 millimeters of mercury, which is actually comparable to first-line antihypertensive medications. Allicin also inhibits platelet aggregation, reducing the risk of clotting. You know, your grandfather ate raw garlic. His cardiologist would have written a prescription for what the garlic was already doing. Now, for preparation. Crush or mince the clove and wait about 10 minutes before cooking or consuming. This gives the alliinase reaction time to complete and lets allicin fully form. Heat above 60 degrees Celsius destroys allicin, so raw is best. If you do cook it, add crushed garlic in the last 2 minutes. Your grandmother knew to let it sit. That 10-minute wait wasn't just habit, it was wisdom. But there's an industry threat. Odorless garlic capsules have become a multi-hundred-million-dollar product category. Most of these contain aged garlic extract, which is processed specifically to remove the allicin, because allicin is the compound that smells. So, they removed the medicine and kept the marketing. Meanwhile, a head of garlic costs about 40 cents. Turmeric shows up in Sanskrit texts as Haridra as early as 250 BC. Ayurvedic medicine prescribed it for biliary disorders, inflammatory conditions, and skin diseases. Traditional Chinese medicine used it to move stagnant blood. In West Africa, it was a remedy for jaundice and liver conditions. In the Levant and North Africa, turmeric served as a wound dressing and preservation agent. Honestly, the universality of turmeric as medicine spans more cultures than almost any other plant on this list. The active compound is curcumin. That's the yellow polyphenol responsible for turmeric's color and basically all of its therapeutic activity. There are now over 10,000 peer-reviewed papers on curcumin, making it one of the most studied phytonutrients in history. Curcumin is what scientists call a pleiotropic compound, meaning it acts on multiple biological targets at the same time. It inhibits the COX-2 enzyme, the same one targeted by ibuprofen, which reduces prostaglandin synthesis and inflammation. It also modulates NF-kappa B and upregulates NRF2, which is the master antioxidant transcription factor. A 2006 study in arthritis and rheumatism found curcumin as effective as diclofenac sodium for rheumatoid arthritis, but with fewer gastrointestinal side effects. Curcumin even crosses the blood-brain barrier, a rare property for a food compound. And it's been studied for neuroprotective effects, but curcumin has low bioavailability on its own, meaning it passes through your gut before being absorbed. Two things can dramatically increase absorption: black pepper and fat. Piperine in black pepper inhibits glucuronidation, which is the liver process that clears curcumin, increasing absorption by up to 2,000%. Your grandmother mixed turmeric into warm milk with black pepper and a spoon of ghee. She called it golden milk. The supplement industry now calls this a bioavailability-enhanced curcumin complex and charges $60 a bottle. Here's the industry threat. Curcumin can't be patented. Pharma companies have tried to synthesize analogs that can be patented, spending hundreds of millions of dollars to replicate what already grows in the ground. Meanwhile, a pound of turmeric root costs just $3. Calendula, also known as pot marigold, was used in ancient Rome as a wound herb for soldiers. Medieval European herbalists called it poor man's saffron and used it for everything from jaundice to fever to eye inflammation. The Cherokee and Potawatomi used related species for skin conditions, and in Egypt, calendula was applied to wounds and used in ritual purification. Its name comes from the Latin calendi, the first day of every month, because it blooms continuously as if it never stops working. The main compounds here are triterpenoids, specifically oleanolic acid glycosides, and flavonoids like isorhamnetin and narcissin. The resin contains calendulin, a polysaccharide with documented mucosal repair properties. Here's how it works. Calendula's triterpenoids modulate lymphocyte proliferation and macrophage activity, which accelerates wound healing by reducing inflammation in the initial phase and promoting granulation tissue formation in the repair phase. A 2009 randomized controlled trial published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology found calendula cream superior to trolamine for acute dermatitis in breast cancer patients undergoing radiation therapy. The mechanism is pretty precise: reduced neutrophil infiltration, increased fibroblast migration to wound sites, and a measurable increase in collagen deposition. For preparation, fresh or dry petals are infused in olive oil for 4 to 6 weeks in a sealed jar, stored in indirect sunlight. Then you strain, press, and seal. The result is a wound-healing oil that can be applied directly to cuts, burns, and skin inflammation. For internal use, like mouth rinses or digestive inflammation, a standard tea infusion works. Your grandmother grew calendula in the kitchen garden and kept a jar of the oil on the shelf. She called it the flower that healed everything. But here's the industry threat. Calendula-based skincare is a growing premium market, with products retailing for $30 to $70. The ingredient cost per product is just fractions of a cent. The flowers grow freely, bloom all season, and self-seed year after year. The genus name really says it all: Achilleia, named after Achilles, the legendary Greek hero who, according to Homer, used Yarrow to staunch the wounds of his soldiers at Troy. Archaeological evidence of Yarrow found at Neanderthal burial sites in Iraq actually suggests its use predates recorded history by tens of thousands of years. The Iroquois, Chippewa, and Navajo each used it independently for fever reduction and wound care. In traditional Chinese medicine, Yarrow appears in one of the oldest known texts as a vulnerary, that is, a wound herb. Now the compound profile: achillin and achillicin, both sesquiterpene lactones, alongside apigenin, a flavonoid that's also found in chamomile, and the alkaloid achilline, which has documented hemostatic properties. Achilline activates platelet aggregation and fibrin formation, so it accelerates the clotting cascade at wound sites. This is the biochemical basis for what ancient soldiers observed empirically. When packed, Yarrow stops bleeding faster. Meanwhile, apigenin acts as a GABA receptor modulator, producing mild anxiolytic and antipyretic effects. A study in the Journal of Pharmacy and Pharmacology confirmed that Yarrow's antipyretic mechanism involves arachidonic acid cascade inhibition, the same pathway targeted by aspirin. As for preparation, fresh leaves were packed directly onto bleeding wounds. That's the traditional battlefield application. For fever, a hot infusion is drunk warm to induce sweating, a diaphoretic response that helps the body break a fever naturally. Maybe your grandmother made Yarrow tea at the first sign of a cold, wrapped you in a blanket, and just waited for the fever to break. The mechanism is sound, the process is valid, but here's the industry threat. Yarrow grows wild across every temperate region of the earth. It needs no cultivation, no fertilizer, no pesticide. It is pretty much completely unmonetizable in its natural form. The Cherokee smoked dried mullein leaves for lung conditions, which, honestly, sounds counterintuitive until you understand the mechanism. The Catawba used it for coughs and respiratory weakness. European herbalists, from Dioscorides onward, recommended it for pulmonary disorders. Mullein was so well established as a lung herb that it was carried to the New World and naturalized across both American continents, becoming once again a free medicine available to anyone who cared to look. Let's talk compounds. Saponins, specifically verbascosaponin, which act as expectorants and help loosen mucus in the bronchial passages. Mucilage polysaccharides, which coat and soothe inflamed mucous membranes. And aucubine, that's the same glycoside we discussed in plantain, providing anti-inflammatory support. The mechanism here is that Mulleine's saponins reduce the surface tension of mucus in the bronchioles, making it less viscous and easier to expel. The mucilage at the same time reduces the inflammatory response in bronchial tissue, so it decreases the cough reflex that's triggered by irritation. A 2003 study in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine found that mullein-based eardrop preparations were effective in reducing pain from acute otitis media in children, comparable to anesthetic eardrops. For preparation, dried leaves, not smoked despite the Cherokee method, are best prepared as an infusion, steeped for about 15 minutes in just boiled water, and strained twice through fine cloth to remove leaf hairs, which can be irritating. Mullein-infused oil, made by packing flowers in olive oil for 4 weeks, is the traditional remedy for ear infections, just a few drops warmed to body temperature in the ear canal. And the industry threat? Cough syrup is a multi-billion-dollar global market. Mullein is a roadside weed that most people drive past without even a second thought. There really is no version of this story in which a pharmaceutical company profits from pointing that out. Ginger shows up in the Quran, in the Talmud, in ancient Sanskrit texts, in Chinese medical records dating back to 400 BC, and even in the writings of Confucius, who, reportedly ate it with every meal. The Roman Empire imported ginger from India at prices on par with black pepper, meaning it was worth its weight as a trade commodity. Honestly, no plant in history has been independently embraced as medicine by more cultures across more centuries. Let's talk about the compound. Gingerols, especially 6-gingerol, found in fresh ginger, which convert to shogols when dried and heated. These phenolic compounds are what give ginger its characteristic heat and, really, its primary medicinal effects. Now, the mechanism: 6-gingerol inhibits 5-HT3 serotonin receptors in the gastrointestinal tract, the same receptor targeted by ondansetron, a pharmaceutical antiemetic used for chemotherapy patients, which costs over $10 per tablet. A Cochrane review of 6 randomized trials confirmed ginger's effectiveness for nausea in pregnancy. And a 2015 study in phytotherapy research showed that 2 grams of ginger powder reduced post-exercise muscle soreness by 25%, thanks to QX1 and QX2 inhibition. Ginger also speeds up gastric emptying, which means less bloating and discomfort after meals. For preparation, you want fresh ginger root, grated or sliced, steeped in 80-degree water for 10 minutes. Not boiling. Boiling converts gingerols to shogals, which have different and honestly, less well-studied properties. For nausea, 1 gram of dried ginger, taken 30 minutes before you think you'll need it. Your grandmother made ginger tea for every upset stomach in the house. She had no idea she was administering a 5-HT3 antagonist. She only knew it worked. Here's the industry threat: ein doubles sturdo van skrawlos, a yarodactory krawan per the nut spring. And pound piece of fresh ginger root costs less than $2. Prescription antiemetics for nausea can run up to $300 per prescription. The gap between those two numbers? That's not science, that's commerce. Alright, we've got 8 more plants to cover, and I want to make sure each gets its due. So here's the essential on each: the compound and the conformation. And hey, if you want the full deep dive on any of these, just drop the plant name in the comments and we'll build a whole episode around it. Thyme. Thymol, a phenolic compound that disrupts bacterial cell membranes, used by Romans as a preservative and by European peasants for coughs. A 2006 clinical trial in Arsnei, Mittelforschung, found thyme IV syrup was just as effective as ambroxol for acute bronchitis. Rosemary, rosmarinic acid, which crosses the blood-brain barrier and inhibits acetylcholinesterase. That's the same enzyme targeted by Alzheimer's medications. Your grandmother put rosemary in everything, and it wasn't just for flavor. St. John's wort, hypericin, and hyperforin. A 2008 Cochrane review of 29 trials found it was better than placebo and just as effective as standard antidepressants for mild to moderate depression, with way fewer side effects. And it cannot be patented. Lavender, linalool and linaloyl acetate modulate GABA receptors. Those are the same receptors targeted by benzodiazepines. A clinical-grade lavender oil preparation was even approved in Germany for generalized anxiety disorder under the name Silexin. The same molecule, sitting in a garden plant that costs basically nothing. Chamomile, apigenin binds to benzodiazepine receptors and has a mild sedative effect. Documented use goes all the way back to ancient Egypt. A 2017 phytomedicine randomized, controlled trial confirmed that long-term chamomile use significantly reduces generalized anxiety disorder relapse rate. Licorice root, glycyrrhizin inhibits 11-beta-hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase, affecting cortisol metabolism, and has documented antiviral activity against HSV and SARS family coronaviruses. Ancient Egyptian, Chinese, and Assyrian records all agree on this one. Comfrey, allantoin and rosmarinic acid accelerate bone and cartilage repair. A 2004 randomized trial in phytomedicine found topical comfrey root extract was actually better than diclofenac gel for ankle sprains. Your great-grandmother called it knit bone. She was using the right word. I want to pause here for a moment because honestly, I think we'd be doing this conversation a disservice if we treated it only as a list of compounds and citations. There's a reason Exodus 30 describes the holy anointing oil as a blend of specific plants: calamus, cassia, cinnamon, myrrh. There's a reason Ezekiel 47:12 describes the leaves of trees along the river as healing for the nations. There's a reason Revelation closes with the image of the tree of life, whose leaves are, quote, for the healing of the nations. The ancient world didn't separate medicine from theology. The plants weren't seen as a backup plan in case the doctors were unavailable. They were considered evidence that a creator who loved human beings populated the world with what human beings would need, not locked away in laboratories, not hidden behind patents, but growing in the ground, in the field, at the roadside, even in the cracks of the pavement. The Cherokee understood this, the Iroquois understood this, the Ayurvedic physicians of ancient India understood this, the herbalists of medieval Europe understood this. What changed wasn't the plants. The plants are unchanged. What changed was the framing. Who was allowed to call themselves an expert, and what knowledge was allowed to count as medicine. This knowledge was never meant to be owned. It was meant to be stewarded. Your grandmother was a steward of this knowledge. Her mother before her was a steward. The Cherokee healer who walked the same ridge your great-grandmother's great-grandmother walked. That healer was a steward. The knowledge passed, hand to hand, season to season, generation to generation. Not in publications, not in patents, but in the act of teaching a child what grows in the yard and what it does. We're not discovering anything new today. We're recovering something old. And recovery, true recovery, means understanding what was taken from you. Not with bitterness, but with clear eyes. Proverbs 4:7 says, "Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom. And, in all you're getting, get understanding." This is that. Alright, 15 plants, 15 remedies your grandparents used that, now, science has confirmed, and not a single pharmaceutical company gets a cent from any of them. Before you close this video, I want to ask you one thing. Drop a comment below and tell me, which of these did your grandparents use? Did your grandmother make elderberry syrup every autumn? Did your grandfather insist on raw garlic? Was there a pot of ginger tea on the stove every time somebody got sick? Was there a calendula plant growing by the back door that nobody could explain, but nobody ever pulled up? Tell me, because that knowledge isn't just yours, it belongs to all of us. And every story shared in those comments is a piece of the record that was almost lost. Now here's what's coming next. We're going deep on the one plant your grandmother probably called a weed, and your cardiologist would call a prescription if they could figure out how to charge you for it. The mechanism is extraordinary, the suppression story is, honestly, infuriating, and the preparation takes less than 5 minutes. Subscribe so you're here when that video drops. And one last thing, if this video gave you something real, not entertainment, not noise, but something real. Hit the like button. It takes 1 second, and it tells the algorithm that this kind of knowledge deserves to travel. Share it with someone specific. The parent who's tired of reaching for the medicine cabinet. The friend who's paying $400 a month for something a plant was doing for free for 3,000 years. The grandchild who never got to learn what their grandmother knew. And subscribe, because the knowledge they do not want you to have, we're not done yet.